Well, hello again. Dr. Welgan here. For those of you who are just joining us in this series, I would like to welcome you to the Welgan Center for Behavioral Medicine. My name is Dr. Peter Welgan. I'm a clinical psychologist, research psychologist, psychophysiologist, and the director of the Welgan Center for Behavioral Medicine. For those of you who have followed me on this journey, you have realized here in my last presentation, I've begun to talk about a series of gastrointestinal disorders that have interested me as a psychophysiologist. There's something that I would like to talk to you about. What you're hearing here is a very brief description of these conditions that I will be discussing. They're medically complex, and for me to actually spend the kind of time relating to you the medical aspects of these conditions, I would probably lose about 97% of you. Okay, it's not that it's unimportant. It is can be very technical, somewhat difficult to comprehend. Perhaps that's one reason why your physicians don't try to sit down and lecture this to you as a patient. Nevertheless, I'm here to discuss this as a psychophysiologist, frankly, to keep it on the light side, to hope to retain your interest, because what we're going to be talking about now is the first of two inflammatory diseases of the gastrointestinal tract. And the first one I'm going to talk about today is colitis. Why am I interested in colitis? Well, if you've been following me, you know that I've spent some time in gastroenterology, okay? And one of those GI conditions here that we frequently saw, and I continue to see in my practice, is a condition that is really difficult. It is called ulcerative colitis. I'm sure you've, for those of you in the general public, I'm sure you have heard the term. For those who suffer from this, you know what it's like. Okay. But as an introduction to the subject of colitis, I want to tell you what I'm interested in as a psychologist. That is a condition that is very sensitive to inflammation. In fact, this is an inflammatory condition, colitis, and that is there is inflammation throughout the colon and rectum. That's where it's located, the colon and generally the rectum, okay? It doesn't spread up into the small intestine or into the gastric region of the gastrointestinal tract. That inflammation, that shouldn't be occurring, by the way, is a direct result of your immune system thinking that your colon is the enemy. Yeah, so let's attack it. What? It's an autoimmune disease. Autoimmune. And what that means is the immune system, thymus gland, there are other components of the immune system, but the thymus gland produces a host of cells that are just designed to kill enemies, okay? And why it has selected your colon, we're still trying to figure that one out. There are lots of reasons I can discuss with you a little later at my orientation meeting, okay? What I'm interested in as a psychologist is that inflammatory response. Okay? The actual response of the thymus gland is a response. It is a behavioral pattern. It is built right into the hardware of one's biological system, but you'll see it responding to a variety of potential dangers it senses within the body. Okay? Now, in the case of colitis, the immune system actually produces inflammation in what's called the epithelium of the entire gastrointestinal. The gastrointestinal tract has a thin surface layer of cells. It's called the epithelium. In the colon, it's also called the mucosa. Okay, it's a protective lining, and the immune system attacks that protective lining, produces an inflammatory reaction. You know what that's like when you have sustain an injury. Okay, you'll see it reddening, swelling. Well, the same thing happens in the colon, and when that occurs over and over again, ulceration of that mucosa and epithelial lining can occur. Bleeds are common, and when you do pass waste products, feces, generally they can be bloody and full of mucus. So, and it is one of those conditions here that carries with us some other problems like abdominal cramps, and weight loss is not unusual here, among a lot of other conditions that you and your doctor can discuss. Anemia is another one. Okay. By the way, it's not curable. Okay? Not curable at this point. They're working on them. Okay? They're working on drugs to reduce the symptoms. They're also studying this from a genetic point of view and the interaction of your genes with the bacterial climate of your colon. Lots going on. But at this point in time, what I'm interested in is what kind of psychological factors here can mediate, increase and decrease the inflammatory response or the risk of an inflammatory response. Is there any way of controlling psychologically the devastating effect of inflammation in the colon? Well, not uncommonly, your gastroenterologist and your family physician may see you as a patient suffering, knowing you're under a great deal of emotional distress and stress, and suggest that you get some help, counseling, to be able to manage this chronic, ongoing, lifelong condition. It really can have a devastating effect on you psychologically, and they know it, and often recommend that you get some psychological help to cope with it. And not uncommonly, they're also thinking that if you can get some help, you can reduce the probability, the likelihood of having a very serious inflammatory reaction. In other ways, modulating it, perhaps even mitigating it at times. Well, as a clinical psychologist, I've been treating colitis patients for a long time in just that format. But as a psychophysiologist, I have something much more interesting for me as a researcher. And that is it possible to actually control and reduce the inflammatory response itself? Is there any way of obtaining some degree of control over that immune system's reaction? That's my research. I'm interested in knowing whether or not an individual can learn how to control the inflammatory response. Really? No psychotherapy? No counseling? Just a learned skill? That's what I'm interested in testing. So for those of you who have colitis and are interested in actually determining whether or not you can actually achieve self-control to some degree over inflammation of the colon, you may be interested in enrolling as a candidate as a participant in my studies on inflammatory bowel disease. By the way, if you do have this condition, it's not going on anywhere in the United States or anywhere in the world that I know of. Because of my work at UCI, I've brought all of this into my foundation for the advancement of behavioral medicine. That's the research arm of my center. So I have ongoing studies, clinical trials, to test a lot of ideas here that I bring with me from UC. Okay. So, by the way, with that in mind, for those of you who are suffering with ulcerative colitis and may have some interest in exploring the options of self-control here that may be available to you and potentially useful, you can contact me at the following email address: PETRWELGAN PH.D as in dog @cox.net. My telephone number, 949-509-6576. By the way, these are clinical trials. This is not a treatment program. We are actually trying to determine the effectiveness of these procedures which I have developed on your ability to actually modulate, control inflammation. Okay, so that is what we're dealing with here. Nasty condition, and as I mentioned to you earlier, not curable. In extreme conditions, the colon can be removed. The small intestine is generally attached to the rectum, or what's left of it. A J pouch is formed in the small intestine in order to serve as a rectum. Okay? So some of you perhaps have already undergone this surgery. Okay? But that is generally at the far end of your doctor's options for you. In any event, if this sounds interesting to you, we'd be happy to talk to you here at the center. There are a number of things that you would want to consider here in terms of qualifying for the study, and that will be available on my website, okay? You'll notice that there are information forms available. If you are interested in the colitis study, click on it, and you will see the kinds of information that we'll need ahead of time if you are interested in becoming a participant in these studies. Okay? They're experimental, they're clinically controlled, all designed to eventually determine whether or not this can be of some help to you. Okay? Okay, that is a real quick run through on ulcerative colitis. Tune in tomorrow, and I'm going to be talking about Crohn's disease, another inflammatory disease of the colon. okay, and the entire gastrointestinal tract. Okay, see you tomorrow.